Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about Star Fox on Nintendo Switch 2. I absolutely believe this is going to happen. Earlier this year I made a video talking about why Star Fox on Nintendo Switch 2 makes a lot of sense. I do think Nintendo is likely working on Star Fox. And while the series has definitely been on some level of a hiatus, I do think when we do finally get to see Star Fox on the Nintendo Switch 2, it's going to be a very big deal. It's going to be out of this world, and I think it's going to become the best-selling Star Fox game of all time. I think there's some real potential here, and that's what I would like to dive further into today. But before going forward, let me ask that if you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. Also, shoutouts to Gale. We're doing a bit of a collaboration here. A few days ago, he put out his own discussion on his thoughts on the future of Star Fox and what he would like to see. And he shared some really cool ideas, including some comparisons to Ratchet & Clank. So I definitely recommend you check that video out as well. It will be linked in the description below. So last year, there was an interview conducted by Video Games Chronicle with Dylan Cuthbert, one of the initial developers for Star Fox. And this is what he had to say on the return of Star Fox. "Oh, I'm sure it'll return. I mean, they keep trying, don't they? They keep trying, not quite achieving the original. But I think that's one thing. My opinion is that the original was born out of the UK Amiga style 3D at the time. Games like Starglider or Carrier Command was born out of those and a bit of the Star Wars arcade game, combined with Namco's Starblade. And then there was all the Nintendo character building, all the characters and stuff, making it very family friendly. It's the combination of all those things that I suppose was what made Star Fox what it was. So some of the more recent titles, maybe say the Namco version for example, are all great games, but there's always that one element missing. That sort of UK old school 3D shooting game element missing from it. So that one was very slick. They got the Starblade side of it perfect. But it's a combination of all elements, you kind of need it all in there to make it work. And I think that's enough to get an idea of what he was getting at. Star Fox is a special series that requires a certain balance that is delicate to get right. And perhaps that is why we've seen Nintendo essentially retread or redo or remake the initial Star Fox game several times. Because those core elements together worked so well, and it's hard to make it right. And so I do believe that to some extent this will be kept in mind for the next Star Fox game. But I don't think that means we're getting another retread of Star Fox 1 or Star Fox 64. I think the next game is going to be different, it's going to be a departure, but it will retain that Star Fox essence. But while I do think Nintendo will be keeping in mind the core elements of what makes Star Fox, there is something that has been lost in the recent entries. And that's this focus on innovation. You think back to the original Star Fox was the first Nintendo game to use polygonal graphics, 3D visuals. And then on Star Fox 64, it was the first game to use rumble. And yes, obviously, as we've progressed throughout time, it gets harder and harder to innovate on that level because we figured out a lot of the different things already. But I do think Star Fox needs to get back to the cutting edge, which I do think is part of the reason why Star Fox Zero was so underwhelming for fans. It was a relatively small game with a low budget effort that did not have great visuals, the visuals were very basic, and it lacked basic features that many of us anticipated like multiplayer. Of course, I will at least acknowledge they made an effort to innovate with the gamepad controls, but they were not received very well. And so going into the next Star Fox game, I expect that yes, they will retain the cool space shooting elements, they will bring in these interesting characters with tons of personality, but also I believe, especially with the Nintendo Switch 2 and the significant leaps we're expecting in terms of power, that Star Fox to some extent will come back to the cutting edge. We will be looking at a game that will be visually impressive and will be doing some very ambitious things. But I also think it will go beyond visuals. I think there will be some innovation from a gameplay perspective as well. How so? Well, we've recently gotten some leaks of the Switch 2 prototype, and the legitimacy of these leaks have been corroborated from multiple places, including a maker of Nintendo accessories. And so I think there's a very good chance that this is legitimate, and when looking at it, we get a pretty good understanding that the Joy-Cons are going to be significantly larger. And I think this is actually really promising, because if the Joy-Cons are so much larger, then there's a lot more space to put more tech inside of it. When looking at the PlayStation 5 controller, it has so many different improvements. And to be honest, I'm going to be a bit surprised if Nintendo's new controller doesn't have some improvements of its own. I expect them to build upon HD Rumble, perhaps have an even better form of haptics, something comparable to the PlayStation 5 controller. Perhaps the control sticks could even have some form of resistive feedback. And if we were to see a controller like this, I think they could greatly benefit Star Fox. In prior Star Fox games, as you would take damage, you would see a progressive breakdown of your R-Wing. And so perhaps they could reflect that through the haptic feedback. If there's some damage, if your wing is taking a hit and you can see a piece of it is missing, perhaps this can be reflected on the controller where you'll see a little bit of a rumble, suggesting that there's something not quite right with that part of your R-Wing. I think they could work wonders to adding to the immersion. Or here's another interesting idea. Imagine if the control sticks do have resistive feedback, similar to a plane when you'll pull back to go upwards. It works the same way in the next Star Fox game. You'll feel a little bit of that resistance as you pull back on the control stick. So it can help you to actually feel like you're actually controlling an aircraft. And so I think there's some fantastic potential there. And if they were to go into a direction like this, it wouldn't entirely surprise me if they could even use Star Fox as a bit of a tech demonstration for what the Switch 2 controller could do. And if that's the case, who knows, maybe Star Fox could be coming out pretty early on for Switch 2. And on that note, let's talk about who might be making this game. Most Star Fox games have been a collaborative effort where Nintendo's worked with some sort of third-party partner. Argonaut Games, Namco, Platinum Games. There have been different partners for Star Fox over the years. And this time I would expect it to be the same. I think they would bring in a partner that they believe would do a fantastic job. Now, I want to stress, I believe this would be a collaborative effort. Look at, for example, the efforts by Mercury Steam. Before Metroid Dread, what they did with the Castlevania series, fans likely wouldn't have been super excited if they had heard that they were working on a Metroid game given the quality of what they did. But under the guidance of Nintendo, they improved, they got better, and they've made some wonderful Metroid games in Metroid Samus Returns and Metroid Dread. So I do think whatever partner Nintendo would bring in for Star Fox, they would make sure it's the right kind of talent that would be a great fit for Star Fox, and they would make sure to guide them in order to ensure it's the best game possible. And we've heard that Nintendo's reaching out to several different third-party partners to work on other Nintendo projects. We don't know who these third-party partners are, we don't know who these projects are, but there are several that are supposedly in the works. But what I'm going to suggest here is Ubisoft. Why Ubisoft? Well, they did make Starlink Battle for Atlas that had Star Fox content in there, and that Star Fox content was pretty good. There were some pretty cool gameplay mechanics and just overall tech in Starlink. It was very impressive. And the Switch version of Starlink, which had the Star Fox content, was by far the best-selling version of the game. Now, the game still greatly underperformed overall for Ubisoft, and for that reason, maybe they won't go back to Starlink again. But perhaps they can take that experience from Starlink and use that to help build an even better Star Fox game in conjunction with Nintendo. Kind of a cool pattern we've seen over the last few generations is that every home console generation, Ubisoft comes out with some sort of exclusive for Nintendo, or at least timed exclusive. In the case of Nintendo Wii, it was Red Steel, which was a really cool looking game. They'd also made sure to take advantage of the hardware, including the controller. And the same can be said for Wii U. Ubisoft had another launch game, and it was ZombiU, that took advantage of the abilities of the gamepad. And then for Nintendo Switch, in its first year, Ubisoft put out Mario plus Rabbids, and saw incredible success. And so there's a clear history here of Ubisoft putting out some sort of exclusive early on for a new Nintendo console, and them taking advantage of the hardware. And with the success of Mario Rabbids, I think Ubisoft might actually be very keen to partner with Nintendo again and use another Nintendo IP. And so I actually think it's pretty reasonable to think that there might be a solid possibility that Ubisoft and Nintendo could be working together on a new Star Fox game. But I don't expect this game to be a carbon copy of Starlink Battle for Atlas. I think it would be its own thing, but it would incorporate a lot of ideas. You see, there are many elements in Starlink that made me feel like this could be a modern, proper Star Fox game. It wasn't just the visuals and being able to fly through space, but actually a big part of the core gameplay loop. So in Starlink, as you explore, there is this sense of an ongoing battle where you have influence over the forces of good versus evil, and it actually reminds me very much of how Star Fox 2 worked, where you would have this map and you explore around the map, defending Corneria, fighting off different randomly generated waves of enemies. There would be times where you'd be cutting off a missile. There would be other times where you'd be taking on some sort of ship or cruiser, getting inside of it and blowing up the core. Something we've also seen in Starlink. So I think that element should definitely be incorporated into the next Star Fox game. This idea of an ongoing battle that you have a constant influence over as you play throughout the game. I think this would offer a great deal of lasting appeal and even more reason to revisit the game more than once, because as you play, everyone's experience might be a bit different. And I also think that yes, there should be a fairly open exploration of at least the Lilat system, the solar system, and when you approach planets, this seamless transition flying through the atmosphere to the surface of the planet, that should be retained as well. But I do not think the game should be fully open world. I think Starlink suffered a fair bit because it was so vast and there was so much to explore, but when you would actually get to these different areas, there wasn't actually much to do. It was essentially the same thing all over. It started to feel a little repetitive, even though there was a lot of really cool exotic environments to find. I think for a proper Star Fox game, things would have to be more condensed, denser. It wouldn't quite be an open world, but there would certainly be open exploration, like I said, with the solar system. But perhaps with the different planets you'd be exploring, yes, you can still fly seamlessly into them through the atmosphere, so they would still be building upon that really cool tech we saw on Starlink, but you wouldn't be exploring the entire planet. Maybe you'd only be able to fly to a certain region of the planet, and once you enter there, you fly in seamlessly, and you can explore a nice pocket, a sizable area per planet. And so there would be some limitation, but there would still be a great deal you can explore. And I think in this way it'd actually make more sense. Because in my opinion, if you're going to be building a game world, you want to design it in a way where it feels immersive, but also believable. And so if they were to make a fully open Lilat system, where you can fly to like 8 or 9, 10 different planets, go into them and explore the entire body, but they're actually kind of small and there aren't too many cities or villages, so there's not really any real reason for you to think, oh, that there is an entire series of civilizations throughout the solar system, that wouldn't make much sense. But if you can explore several different planets, but just pieces of them that have a few different villages, a few different cities, or enemy bases, then the rest of these planets that you can explore can be left up to your imagination, where the idea of a wider world becomes more believable. And so you might be wondering, why am I focusing so much on exploring the planets? I do think they should go beyond just flying around with the R-Wing. I think that's definitely going to be a big part of the game. You would enjoy all throughout the solar system and even in these planets, because there would definitely be missions throughout. I think they would have missions that you can accept where you do have more of a linear path for a brief period of time. I do think there would be other moments where you'd be taking advantage of all range mode, fighting giant bosses and going around the entire environment having an epic dogfight. I think these different things will still be a core part of the game. But I also think bringing in opportunities to incorporate the Landmaster or even bringing in the Walker for certain parts also might make a lot of sense. But I'll even go as far as to say that maybe we can walk on foot. There's so much that Fox and Falco can do in Smash Brothers, and we've seen them running in the Star Fox games. These guys can move. And the idea I have in mind is that yes, when there are enemy bases or enemy territories, you're going to be mostly duking it out in your ships. But I think like Star Fox Assault, it would be nice to sometimes fight on foot. But I mostly like the idea of going on foot so we can explore more of the Star Fox world. Think about it. There are these different races in Star Fox. Corneria is comprised mostly of dog and fox-like people. So that's likely where Star Fox might be from. But what about the other planets? What if there are other planets that have other different villages or areas And as you play throughout the game, experiencing the story, going back and forth, trying to figure out what's going on, you will explore these different areas. You will see where Slippy is from, where Falco is from, and there will be opportunities to talk to characters and get a better understanding of the lore and the history of the world. This could be an opportunity to build a rich, unique Nintendo game that we've never seen before. And what I'm going to mention here brings me back to what Paul Gale was talking about in his own video on this idea of Star Fox for Switch 2, where there could be some elements that feel kind of like Guardians of the Galaxy. You have this really cool crew that has their own background, and as you explore the Lilat system, there are going to be different times where you're going to have run-ins with different characters and see these unique interactions and see how they react to these different environments. There will be a lot of opportunity to see more personality here, which is one of the things that makes Star Fox so special. But before I close out, there's something else I think needs to be addressed. The kind of Star Fox game I'm talking about here may seem very single player focused, but I actually think there's a way to retain multiplayer as well. And it would be optional, but the way I sort of envision the game, I think you'll kind of have a system in place where you're kind of constantly aware of what's going on with the different battles that are taking place throughout the Lilat system. And you will have the option to fast travel to different ones. And so in theory, I think you would be able to activate online mode, and when you have this selection of being able to go to different battles throughout the Lilat system, essentially the way it can be set up, it's not necessarily just against computers, but against other players. You might even be able to form actual squads and engage in massive dogfights throughout the Lilat system, both within planets and in space. And perhaps the results of these battles can impact the overall flow of the ongoing battle between the forces of good in your own personal single-player campaign. Something that's heavily integrated into the adventure. This is kind of how I envision the next Star Fox to be on Nintendo Switch 2. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.